Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
Welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Marlene Cuellar.
I'm Asana Kesano.
And thank you for joining us this morning. It's a lovely Monday morning.
It is the 20th of January.
Yes.
I was saying to you that for whatever reason this is a January, I don't think most people will remember because of the weather. But
I know. Well, speaking of the weather, we have Shania Young on the line and she's going to give us the latest update. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I am okay.
All right, so it's a Monday morning and we need to plan our week out. So tell us, let's start with today.
Okay, well today an increase in shower activity is expected for later as the cold front approaches the country. So in the 24 hours, the skies will be sunny with cloudy spells today and cloudy at times tonight. And a few showers and isolated thunderstorms will continue, but mainly over offshore areas this morning, and then move inland and be mostly over central and southern areas this afternoon, and then increasing tonight and spreading over most areas.
All right. Around what time are we going to be expecting those showers to come in?
On the land this afternoon, but mostly central and south at first, and then over most areas by tonight.
Okay. And what about the winds?
So right now the winds is from the north and northwest at 5 to 15 knots, but again later tonight it's expected to increase and become a bit gusty. So right now the sea state is choppy to moderate, but between either tonight or tomorrow there is likely going to be a caution.
Okay, yeah, it's going to get rough out there with the gusty winds. Yeah.
But there's no caution at this
time. All right, and what about our high temperatures for today?
So high temperatures today will be 81 degrees Fahrenheit along the coast, 82 inland and 75 in the hills. And low temperatures tonight will be 70 degrees Fahrenheit along coastal areas, 64 inland and 61 in the mountains.
Mm-hmm. So we start to get those cooler temperatures starting tonight. Yeah. And for the next few days, what are we expecting?
So tomorrow, most of the shower activity will be offshore, and on land it will just be isolated. But for the rest of the week, there will be little to no rainfall, at least up until Friday. If any, just isolated.
But more importantly, we get the cool temperatures starting tomorrow, right?
Yes, tomorrow morning. The cooler days will be Wednesday and Thursday. So along the coast on Wednesday morning, lows could go as low as 64.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update.
You're welcome.
You have a great day today.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
All right, man. If it's nothing else, I look forward to pulling out the sweater.
Yeah, well, we knew the cold front was coming in this week and we knew it'd be a chilly one. So today we have to get the showers that will usher in the cooler temperatures, and that starts this afternoon. Very important for people headed out to sea. Right now there is no caution, but the gusty winds will come in later on today, which will make the seas rough. So keep that in mind. All right, we're going to keep things moving and get into our eye opener for this morning. And our eye opener, taken from dailyom.com, goes like this. Emotional pain is at the root of our tendency to withhold, and this causes pain to the people subjected to it. The most common form of withholding is what we commonly call the silent treatment. But withholding encompasses any unwillingness to express your true feelings. It also includes an unwillingness to give support, praise, or positive attention to the people you love. We have all known someone who is impossible to please, and many of us have suddenly found ourselves at the other end of a chilly silence with no explanation. At the same time, many of us will recognize our own tendencies to withhold our emotions rather than express them. Most of us have seen both sides of the withholding dilemma. Emotional pain is at the root of our tendency to withhold, and withholding causes pain to the people subjected to it. It is a dysfunctional pattern that creates a breakdown in communication and understanding. If, on the other hand, it is you that tends to withhold, understand that this is a learned response and it can be unlearned. Find safe places to begin to express all that you've been holding back. Begin to make an effort to say what you're feeling and thinking. Give praise to someone you love, and the more you do this, the healthier you and your relationship will become.
I will admit that I'm a bit torn on this one. Simply because I look at the aspect of emotional pain and silent treatment as something that comes usually after an argument with someone.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that person is very close to you, either your relationship partner, your best friend, a sibling, or a parent. And sometimes withholding allows you to be able to step back a bit and contextualize what the argument or what the issue may have been about. But at the same time, prolonged silent treatment leads to an inevitable drawing away, right? So it's, for me, a matter of being able to understand why perhaps it's necessary to withhold at times the emotional pain having come out of an issue that may be heavy for both parties, right? And the fact that, to me, I'm speaking for myself here, sometimes the silent treatment is better simply because it allows, like we always say, a form of catharsis. It allows you that time and that space to be able to process things, and then you reconvene and reconnect. So that's the reason I'm kind of torn on this one today.
But I think you said the most important thing. It's not choosing to not address it. What you're talking about is taking a pause, kind of collecting your thoughts and feelings, and then coming back to it, because that's the key part. You know, I find that this is usually the easiest way to deal with challenging situations. It's you know, if I just don't have to deal with you, and if I don't talk to you, then somehow I feel that I am punishing you. The problem is, though, that you are assuming, if I do that to you, I am assuming that you even know why.
Yeah.
And many times, I would say the majority of the times, you are clueless as to why. Yes, it may be an argument, but we don't know what about the argument. Maybe it wasn't about what we're fighting about, but something you said in the fight that really hurt me. Maybe it was something that happened before the fight that had been building up before that's really hurting me. But you have no idea. And I think that that's one of the things that we tend to develop over time. We just expect people to be mind readers. You know, it's like, you should know that X, Y, and Z would disappoint me or get me angry or make me feel frustrated. And we never say it. Then we get mad, we stop talking, we shut down, and nobody ever knows what the problem is. So the problem can never be fixed.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that's part of what I get from it. It's just reminding us that difficult conversations are exactly that, difficult to have. But there's something about learning and practicing how to have them that goes a long way. And it really says it most importantly in the end. You got to practice. And you have to practice with people you trust. It's people who aren't going to judge. A lot of times we don't want to say what's hurting us because we feel vulnerable to do so. So you got to be careful where you're going to take it, and know that it's a safe space, as a person who will be more empathetic than perhaps judgmental to start off with. But nobody is a mind reader. Even the people you paid to say who read your mind, that's questionable. So don't expect your family or your loved ones or your friends or your co-workers to do it either.
Well, first of all, part of what stands out in the eye-opener this morning is the fact that it's a learned thing.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a condition, so to speak, right? And as much as you have learned it over time, you can unlearn it over time as well. But again, speaking for myself here, I'm a very expressive person, right? And I admit I'm oftentimes difficult because of what my expectations are and what have you. But one thing I've learned is that if I get into a verbal exchange with someone, an emotional uproar, all this other stuff, there are times when I do say certain things that I don't necessarily need to say, one, and two, I don't weigh the impact of what I am saying on that individual until after it's said. And so what I've learned in some cases, it's just best to be quiet. And then that quiet becomes a silent treatment. And so it creates a certain ease and a certain tension, in the sense that the tension is we go by for hours, 2 days, 3 days, not saying anything to each other.
There's a palpable tension when there's a silent treatment.
But ease in the sense that, well, you know what, we're not even addressing the issue right now, so I'm okay not even broaching it. So that gives me time to be able to gather my thoughts and come at it from another point of view, which may be lesser intense in approach. So that's how I look at it.
Like I said in the meeting, it's just once you're going to get around to it, because you're never going to fix the problem if you just ignore the problem, you know. All right, but that is, you know, and I think we're all guilty of it. As you said, it's something we've learned. And a lot of times these things we just develop, it works for us, or we feel that way. But more importantly, it's about learning to have those tough conversations, figuring out how you feel, and addressing it with the person that you need to, right? So that is our eye-opener for this morning. Now, shifting gears, of course, it's the first day of the work week, and we are going to do a recap of the big news from last week and what we can look forward to in the week ahead. So that's coming up in Eye on the News.
All right, so Marlene, there's a lot to unpack from the events of last week. It just so happens that last week was pretty condensed in terms of the number of issues that were coming out. I know I sat here a week ago and we were discussing an incident that happened with a 3-year-old toddler, and that was only Monday. Thereafter, there were several other issues that unfolded on a political front, and of course, otherwise in the social space. And so I believe it is only fair for us to kind of revisit some of those issues so that it's not lost on us as to what is taking place, right? While yes, there are other issues that we will look forward to for this week, and we'll touch on that towards the end of today's Eye on the News, I want to be able to go back a bit. Aside from the issue of the murder of 3-year-old Mark Tuyul Jr. and the subsequent arraignment of his stepfather, Kenrick Longsworth, I want to go back a bit to what transpired in respect of the ceremonial opening of the Supreme Court. We recall that members of the Bar Association, perhaps not all of them, but there was sort of a sit-out from the opening last Monday. And this had to do with a release that was issued by the Bar Association to its membership regarding the sidelining of the bar president from the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, her seat at that table, in a manner of speaking. And this is in reference to the bar president, who is also the Director of Public Prosecutions, Sherlyn Vidal. Now, we are yet to see where this issue goes. I know that it is before the court, and I know that Attorney Andrew Marshalek is leading the charge on behalf of the Bar Association. Bear in mind, however, that the Chief Justice is about to retire, about to reach the retirement age of 65, and so there's a likelihood that he may not return. There's also a likelihood that he will be granted an extension to dispense with the cases that are before him. So that kind of hangs in the balance. And like I said, it's a live matter that's before the court. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Right?
It was interesting, though. I think you could see a marked difference in this year's opening for several reasons. One, the bar executive sat out. Secondly, so there was no presentation by the Bar Association. The Attorney General wasn't there. And, you know, it just made for a very different opening. We usually see everyone involved. We had said last week that it would be interesting to see if other members of the Bar Association would have supported the sit-out from the activity. It didn't seem that there were any less people other than just the executive.
Yeah. Well, you also have to remember as well that you're no longer compelled to be a part of the bar.
Yeah.
So you do have attorneys who independently chose to attend, and that's to be respected as well. I mean, this is a bar situation with the JLSC and not necessarily the wider legal fraternity, right? So that was one issue. I just wanted to put that out there.
Did he address the backlog as well?
Yeah.
Citing resources?
Well, that has been a perennial issue, right? And I recall having interviewed with the Attorney General, who himself admitted that while, yes, every time it comes to planning and trying to get finances in order ahead of the upcoming fiscal year, there is a push to try to get more resources, but it's based on priorities, right? And so sometimes what the judiciary wants in terms of being able to fulfill its mandate to the people may not necessarily be the direction in which government is going insofar as allocating funds and what have you. So there is that issue, indeed, there is that issue. So again, it's just one thing that I wanted to put out there. This happened last week, right? And because of how things unfolded so quickly, it may have gotten kind of lost in the fray, right?
The Attorney General has also spoken on the issue with the Chief Justice's upcoming retirement, right?
Yes, he has.
They're going to enter into conversations about what next?
Yes, the Prime Minister is set to meet with CJ Benjamin to discuss possibly the way forward. Again, like I said, at this point, it's not clear in which direction either side will choose to go insofar as either accepting retiring at 65 and not seeking a renewal of a contract, or an extension granted, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to dispose of the matters that are currently before him, right? So that is that. I want to move on as well, and I think this particular issue may have gotten totally lost, and it's the installation of a new Guatemalan president last week, all right? With so much happening on our side, you know, there was the installation of Alejandro Giammattei as the new president of Guatemala, and why this is important is because of the Belize-Guatemala situation, right? This individual comes in with a new mandate. We don't know for certain at this point where Belize stands in all of what he has set out before him during his term of presidency. And of course, the fact that both countries have since decided prior to his election to proceed with going to the ICJ to resolve the territorial dispute. So
this is an interesting one to watch, and this clip I think was on Friday. This was an interview on Friday where he speaks of wanting to set up a meeting with Belize at the adjacency zone, or here in Belize, and that would be. You are right. You know, both governments decided before he became president to go to the ICJ, but he spoke of looking at settlements, which is a whole different direction. President Giammattei, I must say, in following his campaign, never spoke of the Belize issue the way the previous president, Jimmy Morales, kind of used it as his platform. So the fact that it has not been a part of his campaign, he didn't even mention it in his inauguration speech, is somewhat, it leads people to believe that perhaps it's not the most pertinent issue to him, as we clearly saw with President Morales before. His foreign minister, Pedro Brolo, is also expected to be in that meeting as well, but we don't know when that's going to be. I'd imagine it'd be soon because he's newly installed and he's making his rounds. So we'll see where that goes. This year, by summer, I believe, the Guatemalans should present their argument to the ICJ, because remember, it's 1 year after you initiate the process. And they have already selected their judge for the ICJ. So there's a lot to wait and see in this issue.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the other issue that we discussed, or we covered last week. And I guess what is still very much a talking point has been the matter of Lev Thurman.
Yeah.
And I will speak from a political point of view, insofar as the fact of the upcoming leadership convention on February 9th. And I say political, not from a partisan perspective, but from the general point of view here. So you have the United Democratic Party that seems to be wrapped by scandal after scandal, right? And the first to have sort of taken root in the public sphere is the issue of this Armenian-American businessman who had close ties to Belize. He had business partnership in Belize, and he had sought certain diplomatic positions, so to speak, through Belize. And lo and behold, the individual is imprisoned in the state of Utah for arguably one of the bigger financial scandals there, the fraud of having duped the U.S. state government out of $511 million through a biofuel company where they were sort of doing a lot of hanky-panky, right? And receiving monies from the government, unbeknownst to them what was taking place. Nonetheless, Lev Thurman's business partner, one of two siblings he did business with. You have Jacob Kingston, you have Isaiah Kingston. So in a sworn statement, a deposition, 18 pages long, Jacob Kingston is prepared to testify that sums of $25,000 per month were paid out to a Belizean government official. Names have been flying around. We will not go in that direction until and unless Mr. Kingston is able to testify, call those names, and provide the evidence that supports his claim. Nonetheless, it's a black eye on the United Democratic Party, right? And so the Prime Minister called a press brief on Wednesday, and for all intents and purposes, it came off as if though it was just another fire that he's put forward to out, right? And such has been the case for quite a number of times over the last term of office. And so to an extent, it lends to a certain kind of cynicism, because people don't really believe that much will come of it either way, right? And you have to look at it from the broader point of view that it's an election year, and of course, February 9th, which is the leadership convention date that has been set, is almost upon us. So it's difficult to do anything consequential. I get that, right? So,
but it's interesting though, because I think one of the things that I heard in conversations, which perhaps we haven't explored before, I think the expectations of Prime Minister Barrow are different this time around, because he's not up for re-election. In other words, you have an opportunity to really leave showing that you will go as far as possible to be able to ensure that if this is the case, those who are involved will face the consequences. But the press conference was kind of just, well, we don't know, it's out there, which is just what was reported in the news anyway. What I found interesting was at the House meeting on Friday, where Honorable Karim Musa spoke of perhaps the Prime Minister, and I don't know if it's actually possible, but he did put it out there, as the leader of the country request the information from the court system, because clearly as the leader of the nation, maybe they'd listen to him more. But But I think it's an interesting point. Whether it's possible, I honestly don't know. Because I think that what he's speaking of is perhaps what the Belizeans would feel more comfortable with.
Yeah.
If there is a sense of urgency, a sense of aggression in really being able to seek out those who are involved. It's not just about receiving the 25,000. I think it's also just linking to so many other stories that we have heard and seen, and some are able to we see go through the court system, some just remain as rumors. But it's the fact that government officials and elected leaders seem so prone to cozying up to nefarious characters who eventually end up being a part of an international scandal. And it shows a lot of questionable choices along the way in terms of your own barriers, your own protections, who you'll help, how you'll help them. So, you know, because if you look at this issue, had the U.S. not said, no thanks, we don't want this man as an honorary consul, he could have been representing Belize in the United States.
Well, I've used this example loosely to friends of mine in discussion, and I'll say it here. So there was a cabinet meeting last Tuesday in which this matter was discussed among members of the decision-making body, the executive. To me, it's similar to a situation where you have a classroom teacher, for instance, right? You have 31 students. The teacher walks into the classroom and finds that something offensive has been written on the chalkboard. So the teacher perhaps goes around the room asking, say, who wrote that on the chalkboard? You don't expect that anyone would own up to it.
Yeah.
First and foremost, nobody's going to say, I did it, sir, or I did it, miss. They won't. So it should
especially in the presence of the rest of the class.
Yeah, so it should trigger some form of an independent probe into
of course.
What happened, who's behind it.
Yeah.
Go beyond just the satisfactory or the superficial satisfactory answer of, I don't know, I wasn't the one who did it. It requires going a bit more because there's a live allegation being made.
Yeah.
And the fact that there is public confidence at hanging in the balance, you ought to go a bit more.
And I think that was the expectation with the hosting of the press conference, that there would have been something revealed other than saying, well, I asked them and they said no. Because let's just go back. And I think in the history, as far as we can recall, honesty isn't exactly a part of the characteristics that we see from I mean, can you recall one elected official who has gotten up, faced the public and said, yes, I was involved, yes, I did, yes, I'm leaving? So I don't expect that change to occur today. Yeah. In fact, there's a lot of I mean, we started to hear some of the cop-outs already. Well, we don't know if it's campaign financing, and we don't know. It's almost like here are the excuses before the truth comes out. So I feel that the frustration from the public just comes from what is clearly a lack of will and intent. Now, you can try like anything else and not get far enough, but show that you did. That's about having that effort. So I think you're right in terms of the constant cynicism from the public and the fact that they just feel that once again things are just continuing and we're not diving deep enough, we're not getting close enough to answers or to anybody taking responsibility.
So moving away from the Lev Derman issue, you also had two other scandals that were made public last week, and one has to do with the audit of the National Sports Council, and the other had to do with an audit of the Juliancho Technical High School. Now, I'll take on Juliancho first and then touch on the Sports Council afterwards. The matter of the Juliancho Technical High School is most unfortunate and bizarre in a sense, considering the fact that the institution is still without a principal as we speak. They're still looking to put someone there who will fill that void or that vacancy. However, the previous principal has been named in this particular scandal in respect of how monies were spent and that sort of stuff, how contracts were awarded to other members of staff. Now, the idea here is that it was said, oh, I did not know that you could not have done that, or that's not the policy or whatsoever. But I will come from a layman's point of view here. A conflict of interest does not necessarily require the greatest legal mind to point that out to you. If you're awarding a contract for works to be done, in this case to either build a classroom building or what have you, for works to be done in and around the compound, and you are awarding that contract to a member of staff, something is already wrong there. Because at the end of the day, contracts ought to be put out, especially when you're using public funds, they ought to be put out for tender, right? So that other persons can be able to bid on these contracts. It would be assumed that someone who is a member of staff has inside information as to how to bid and how to go about that process fairly easier than someone who has to come from outside and present their particular bid. And so this is one of the glaring instances, and this was brought to my attention over the weekend as well, Marlene. Perhaps this is an opportunity for the public to seek a response from the Belize National Teachers Union in respect of this matter. Because you would know that the BNTU has always come down on government for transparency, accountability, and to move away from this kind of corruption, right? But it's happening at a government institution where, for all intents and purposes, some of the staff members are also members of the BNTU. So I think it requires them to come out and say, you know what, we condemn this altogether, or, you know, we distance ourselves from it. Whatever the case may be, I would want to call on them to come forward and say something.
Absolutely, but there's something else that nags at me with this issue, because the prior principal has been out for almost a year. And this audit was from 2015 to
14, 15.
Okay.
So thereabout, yeah.
So it leads me to wonder if there's any connection between the results of this audit and why he's no longer principal. And I don't know, I'm asking questions here, because there's been an entire year where the school has had no principal. Why was he suddenly no longer the principal? And now we find out a year later.
With the retirement age, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we don't know that. We don't have any answers. So is there something, I mean, were they aware? Was the school aware? Were there perhaps, listen, you're not going to be a member of staff and know that I get a $100,000 contract to do something and you're not aware. Surely there were perhaps rumblings or something along those lines. But I think the question goes even deeper. It just shows, you know, if you look at, this school is so important. I mean, I think if people haven't been to Southern Belize, they may not understand. It is at the junction of the Southern Highway, the San Antonio Road, in the area known as Dump. It's not a dump site, they just call the area Dump. And so you have teenagers from all these far-flung villages coming to Julian. And I mean crazy hours. They wake up like 3, 4 in the morning to get to this high school. They do traditional teaching and they also do vocational training as well. Why couldn't this money have been given to the students? Why couldn't they have gotten the class involved in a project to build a chicken shed or to get others involved and help to uplift these very same children for when they go back home, teach them about work ethic and how to, under the guidance of what I would assume to be the teacher that's getting the contract anyway. It shows a lack of vision in terms of the implications on the students and what could have been done as well. I mean, this is serious. This is within a school system. These are lessons that will be passed on to these children, these lessons in greed, these lessons in corruption. They've already been passed on to these children because they've witnessed it firsthand. And that is a greater disappointment, I think, than any money's lost.
What makes it all the more interesting, Marlene, is that...
And why are we just dealing with it now? It's 4 years later.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the Auditor General's report came out in October of last year, and it should have been addressed at the subsequent House meeting after that report had been submitted to the Prime Minister, and we've had this would have been the third one, if I'm not mistaken, since October. So that's a question in and of itself. However, what's more interesting is that the former principal, who's at the heart of this issue, is the United Democratic Party candidate, the standard bearer for Toledo West. And so there is perhaps some kind of political consequence in terms of this individual representing that constituency come November 2020. So
I'd venture to guess, and I am guessing, that the public is not the least bit surprised that there's some political connections here.
Yeah. So there is that, in fact, there is that. And so how this plays out is going to be interesting because according to the Prime Minister, files have been handed over to the Commissioner of Police so that there's action to be taken once these individuals are found criminally culpable.
Yeah.
Now, we have seen the prior Commissioner of Police being handed over files for action to be taken, and he essentially sat on his hands, right? Nothing happened. So that in itself creates another cynicism going forward. That remains to be seen how this new Commissioner of Police will approach the matter.
And it's also a unique year. It's an election year, so where things usually get out of the ordinary around this time.
So moving on to the issue of the National Sports Council, where the former Minister of State, who holds a position as the Consul General in New York, is also named in the fleecing of monies from the NSC. That has to do with the Petrocaribe funds as well. All right, so the Prime Minister will call upon Herman Longsworth to answer to some of these charges in respect of how the monies were spent and who got what and the extent of his role in it. And then there's the former director of the Sports Council, who's also under question here. So there's a lot. And to look at it from a broad perspective, Marlene, you're looking at two leadership candidates within the UDP who are currently under fire, right, for these scandals. Yeah. It's an interesting state of affairs, to say the least.
And I think that the public is frustrated, and I think that, you know, I was thinking last week we had a conversation with representatives of the Human Services, and it still stays with me because when we spoke of abuse cases reported, they said last year they had 1,300 abuse cases reported to them. Do you want to venture a guess to how many social workers who would be employed to go and investigate these exist in the country or had in the country? Just a guess. Wild guess.
I'll say 10.
20.
20. Okay, I'm halfway there.
So we're looking at resources, and we're looking at resources being squandered. And I think this is the connection that people have made now. They see where we have deficiencies in the country, and then they hear of these large sums of money just essentially being given away to people who are connected. And the people, the children, the children in an abused home, the children who don't have a scholarship to go to school, the parent who's struggling out there, they're the ones who are suffering. So I think that that's the fatigue that people feel. And when we have reports like, and it's not the first, you know, we know, at least we see these reports, whether there'll be an investigation made, will it be like the Senate committee report, which we still haven't gotten as yet. So I think it's a really frustrating time for people, and I think hopefully this will be an opportunity to see meaningful action being taken against corrupt practices that are clearly being proven.
Some would say that's wishful thinking.
I know. Well, I understand, and that's what I'm saying. The cynicism is there because we see, okay, you invest in a report, in a committee, you have this public investigation, and then nothing comes from it, you know? And then you just have all these excuses as to why it can't come out. A perfect example of excuses is looking at the chamber request for the Emer Hernandez contract. You know, it's one of those things that I think that the Prime Minister himself said, oh, they can have it. And then when the chamber makes the request, there are all these little nuances that are being picked apart. The Freedom of Information Act is about getting access to information that should be public. So the idea of not invoking it properly while I understand there may be protocols, you're still accepting that it's a public document that should be fed on, that should be passed on. So it was literally just nitpicking to withhold the process till the Prime Minister made the public commitment again, and then it was delivered. So, you know, I think it's actions like these that really just get people feeling, like you said, that they have wishful thinking in seeing anything changing.
The final thing before we conclude, so there's what is it called? A search and rescue effort going on? Is it a hunt for an individual American visitor who went missing from an island over the weekend?
Yeah, that was.
You want to share some information that you have?
I have to find the article. So there's an American tourist that was on a tour. The tour goes from Key Cocker, I believe, to Placencia, so it's an overnight tour. They stop and they camp at different islands along the way, one of them being Rendezvous Key. She was along with a friend, and they were camping out in Rendezvous Key. And when they woke up the next morning, she was no longer there. Now, Rendezvous Key is not a populated island. It's not Key Cocker or San Pedro. It is, you know, a small island with a couple of huts, and people just usually camp out. So it's a very serious situation. I know the family has been pleading. They've been posting things online. They're working with the U.S. Embassy, the police, and the tour company to find out where she is. It's 2 days later.
Is the Coast Guard involved?
Is nowhere to be found, The
Coast Guard is involved in the effort?
I'd imagine. So, I mean, how do you just go sleep on an abandoned island with a group of people and the next day you're no longer there? So we do have some information up about that. So there she is. Her name is Amanda. I'm trying to get the last name, but that's what she looks like. But we do hope that there's some good news that comes out of this story and not some tragedy.
So that is what we'll be looking forward to in terms of our coverage for today. And of course, looking forward to the next couple of days, there is the Senate meeting that follows Friday's House meeting as well.
That's right.
So I know we went into overtime with the island.
Yeah, but it was a lot. I didn't realize there's so much that happened last week till you started to put it into perspective. And you're right, each one warranted to be revisited.
Yeah. So that concludes our Eye on the News this morning.
All right, now it's time for us to get to business and start to have our conversations here on Open Your Eyes. And of course, we're starting off with a conversation with the Nursing Association of Belize. They were in the news recently as well. They're speaking about some of the issues that they are having. And so we're going to get some further clarification about that in the first part of our show.
And then the second part of our show, we're going to be looking at fire management in Belize. And this is in respect of forest fires, or what we call wildfires. So we'll have our friends from the Forest Department joining us for the second segment.
And then, of course, we are remembering Andy Palacio, the late, great Andy Palacio, in the final part of our show. And you can look forward to that as we close off for today. We're going to go ahead and take a break. But before we do, we got our birthday shout out. And we are saying a happy birthday to
Bridget Lobos.
All right, Bridget, you have a great day today. That's from all of us here at Channel 5 and Open Your Eyes. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to the Nursing Association of Belize, so stay tuned.
With over 100 years of service excellence in Belize, the Belize Bank Limited recognizes the importance of leading the way as we enter into this fast-growing technological world. Our Belize Bank mobile banking app virtually places a number of banking capabilities in the palm of our customers' hands, anytime, anywhere, through the use of their Android or iOS devices. The Belize Bank, delivering a convenient and enhanced banking experience to meet the demands of our customers' digital lifestyle. The Belize Bank, our country, your bank.
Signing up for Smart's broadband got even better. You can Now bundle and get a free monthly prepaid mobile plan with your broadband service and enjoy up to $70 in savings. Or you can upgrade your mobile plan for an additional $25 and enjoy an unlimited postpaid plan with unlimited calls, texts, and $40 free data. With Smart's fast internet speeds, you just have to choose the speed that works for your needs. Don't wait! Visit the Smart showroom near you and sign up for your broadband plus mobile bundle. And why not? Sign up and add Netflix to the mix. Smart, your full-service communication company.
What if the profits of your bank were shared equally with you instead of with unknown shareholders and large corporations? What if those profits remained in Belize to enrich the communities where we live? What if just having an account with your bank meant that you were now a part owner of that bank? What if your voice mattered and you had a say in how your bank is being run? What if your bank was always looking out for your best interests and its biggest goal was to see you succeed? That's what it means to be part of a credit union where all of our members are in this together. Communities work best when they work for each other. Cooperation strengthens us all. Discover the credit union difference and find out just how stronger we can be together.
Join us for the first edition of Caribbean Passport for 2020, right here on this station.
Been drinking all night, feeling so high, better not drive, won't even try. Been drinking all night, feeling so high, better not drive, ain't gonna try. Been drinking all night, feeling so high, better not drive, ain't gonna try. If you're drinking and driving, I'm not going with ya. If you're drinking and driving, I'm not going with ya. People die every day, I'm not going with ya. I'ma find my own way, I'm not going with ya. It's okay, I'll wait. Even good people make mistakes. I don't wanna realize when it's too late. Drinking and driving is never safe. If you're drinking and driving, I'm not going with ya. If you're drinking and driving, I'm not going with ya. Been drinking all night, feeling so high, better not drive, ain't gonna try. Been drinking all night, feeling so high, better not drive, ain't gonna try.
And welcome back. We are commencing the first segment of our discussions this morning. We are joined by Darrell Spencer. He is the president of the Belize Nurses Association. You would recall that since last week we have been covering issues involving nurses and some of the challenges they're facing with the overall system to which they belong. Good morning, Mr. Spencer.
Good morning, and thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Let's begin first of all by outlining what some of the primary issues are that you guys are facing as a collective.
Well, firstly, I must say again, thanks for having us to explain what's the position. We're primarily attacking the issues, like we said earlier on, that are pressing. They cannot be resolved next week or next month. They are things that should have been done already, as a matter of fact. And in all intents and purposes, we made steps to have them completed before we even got to this point. So, like a retirement point, it happens on a day. You cannot wait 6 months later on to solve it because it's something that's happening. To catch up for the position of the task force, we just finished a national tour, the association meeting with the membership. And the position is that the task force was created, yes, from last year, around September, October. It is a mirror image of another committee that we had, the Nursing Action Plan Committee. So the task force and this committee are one of the same principally. So we were supposed to be unveiled basically this year being celebrated as the Year of the Nurse. Because there are these pressing issues that are solved with time, and the time has passed, that is why we brought them to the forefront, and we actually had to jump the gun in the presentation of what is the task force.
Yeah. So the issues that you are bringing to the table, there have been long-standing issues that nurses in Belize have been facing.
Oh, yes.
And you said you also went through your consultations as well to be able to help to clarify your position. Tell me what the nurses are saying seems to be the major issue for them at this point.
All right, so the tour we started in Punta Gorda, we worked our way right up to Corozal and ended up in Belize Friday morning. And yes, we stand to be on the criticism that we could have been a little bit more forthcoming with the creation of the task force. Yeah. But after nurses were educated on the objectives of the task force, the points that we are working on, and why the task force basically made a step out to the public at that point in time, which is just 2 weeks ago, when the task force was created from October. When they were all filled in with that, we had an almost unanimous agreement to continue forward. So the nurses really were receptive to the positions we held, and they could all see that they were all things that we need as a body, as an organization, to continue to grow.
Let's go back a bit. While you've mentioned retirement as perhaps one of the issues at hand, what is your other challenge, or what are your other challenges that are kind of frustrating the work that you guys do as a body?
Well, as a body, I would have to say the Nurses Association's challenges are regaining a respect for the nurse, regaining a respect for the association, to show the worth of the nurse and the association. That even carries a little friction with the task force per se, because seniority in nursing may not have been pushing the narrative of getting the association to full strength to support. And now we find ourselves supporting them. Of course, there is a professional point from which the association supports the task force and the seniority of nursing for the advancement. So that is our major flaw right now. Again,
I think you have to, that sounds like a very complex issue, and I'm trying to understand what you mean by that. You say the seniority of nursing, what does that mean?
So at present moment, the three major seats that we are fighting for, we're not fighting for,
that need to be filled,
are the chief nurse or the deputy director of health services.
Which Nurse Eligio used to be.
Used to be.
Yes.
Her assistant, because that position was practically never filled. It was filled temporarily again by Ms. Anne Matut, which has ascended into that acting position. And then we have the position of the registrar of nursing. So
currently you have an acting chief nurse, is that what you're saying?
An acting.
No assistant.
No assistant.
And the registrar?
Is already retired, basically working on an extension.
Why are these roles critical in being able to complement or perhaps ensure even quality standards from the nurses in the country?
Well, to question that the need for a chief is a good question. if we don't have a head, this is a person really versed in the nursing process, the functions of a nurse, the responsibility of nurses and nursing throughout the country.
Yeah.
Some people get confused and say, but why can't a doctor do it? Like we always say, the nurses are the backbone of the health system. And if the backbone does not have a head, then the body will go to ruin. And that is the position that we must address when it comes to the chief nurse. You want somebody very intimate with the organization, the operations of nurses and nursing in the country to be the head, to say these are the decisions that we would want to make the nurse's life a little bit easier and to make put the nurse in a position where they can practice more professionally and safely for the patient.
Yeah. So that's one of the first things that you have sounded the alarm for, that you would want to see an establishment of a chief nurse or a deputy director of health services, which has been filled by a nurse, that assistant post, which is currently empty, and your registrar.
And the registrar.
Okay, so that's one of the issues that you're trying to get out there, and I know you have an upcoming meeting with the ministry. What the other issue you were speaking of was the shortage. And we were chatting before, and I was saying, well, you know, nursing shortage is global. Everywhere across the world, people are growing up, children are growing up saying, I want to be a doctor, not necessarily going towards nursing. And so there's a deficiency. What is your issue in terms of how Belize addresses that?
Okay, very well said. And this deficiency is international.
Yes.
So I am the type that if you have a problem, if you are going to bring a problem to me, then it would be best resolved if you would brought a position of resolve.
Yeah.
Bring an answer. And there have been researches done in the country and based on international quotas. When I started nursing back in 91, there was already a shortage. The population was a little over 150, 175,000. We are now at 400,000 and basically the same amount of nurses are on the wards. We've been making presentations to the ministries responsible, that be Public Service and Ministry of Health. This is the quota of nurses we need so that we can give proper care. And the posts, the amount of available posts basically have remained the same. So when do we as a country decide, look, we have to create these posts so that we can retain our nurses?
Let's put that into some perspective, just so that our viewers and perhaps myself can also be able to follow along. If we're looking at the Carl Huchner Memorial Hospital, for instance, as the nation's referral institution, biggest, right? Are we saying then that we may not have as many nurses as we ought to have for that institution?
Yes, that's exactly what we're saying.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So the quota, basically nurse-patient ratio, is very important.
Yes.
You cannot expect to have one nurse attend to 10 or 15 patients with the same high standard as you would expect them to deal with 3 or 4 patients, which the quota, the nurse ratio balance there should be around 3 to 5 patients per nurse.
So one nurse should be attending to, paying attention, checking charts, checking IV, checking how they're doing, comfort level, reporting to the doctor for 3 to 5 people.
5 patients.
In Belize, we're doing double that.
We are doing double that in some instances, triple that. Some instances we have one nurse and there are 18 or 19 patients.
Wow.
So the burden there is that the nurse is kept running around, and there are quite instances where the work still cannot be done.
But then the end result is the fact that I, as a patient, get admitted to ward, or I go to get medical assistance, and I walk away not getting the proper care, treatment, and attention that I ought to have gotten, but I wouldn't be any wiser to what the situation is as to why I did not get that particular quality of treatment, not knowing the dynamics and the politics of what is happening with this shortage, correct?
Hence, correct. Hence, this is why I think we need to know more, take it to the public, to catch the public up on what are the realities we face as nurses in the hospital.
Now, this is a crucial issue because I know that it's not necessarily, well, I don't know, I can't say that. My assumption is that perhaps any institution is looking for more nurses, but the problem is there aren't nurses. People are going to nursing school, but quite a number of them don't work in Belize. They move on automatically because the nursing shortage is everywhere. And I know at some of the institutions, people have been pulling double shifts for years. I mean, you do twice the amount of work because there is no one else to do it. So my question is, in bringing this issue to the forefront, you said that you don't want to just say it's a problem, you want to offer a solution. What is the solution that you're proposing to this issue?
Actually, your assumption is pretty much in line. However, two things. We do get a small output of nurses from the university and from surrounding countries that still find Belize as an interesting place to come and work. So there are the possibility of getting satisfying some of this shortage. Like I said,
how do the Cuban doctors and nurses fit into this equation?
All right, so though the Cuban delegation basically is brought on, depends on the request of the ministry. I don't want to blatantly throw the Cuban nurses and doctors under the bus, but we have, in the past, they were more coming across, and we have been facing some difficulties with the way they perform compared to the guidelines that we have here in Belize. So,
well, I think the language barrier is perhaps the biggest one.
That's one of the biggest ones. Again, the way they do their practice, the education might be the same, but what they bring across are what they learn basically on the units. So all their little misbehaviors and misdeeds, that is transcended and then transposed into our system. So when we have found difficulty with our staff based on their performance, we have always had them make requests to have that staff taken back, and that gradually decreased the amount of positions that were filled.
So the solution you were saying is to hire more nurses within
hire more nurses, and let's apply logic to the equation. All these nurses work pulling doubles. It is financially good for the nurse. It is professionally bad for the nurse and the patient, because you are pulling you're tired. And as I say, if you're pulling a double...
How long is a shift?
Well, there are people working 8-hour shift, there are people working double. 12 hours. Obviously, the ones that are working 12 wouldn't pull doubles, but then 12 hours in and of itself, that's a long hours to be working. So I work 12-hour shift, and I love my 12-hour shift. However, after that 12-hour shift, I don't want to. You're pretty much done for that day. And I said, so we have.
So I'm just trying to understand. So if I do an 8 double shift, what is my schedule like?
It's 16 hours, 7 in the morning until 11 in the night.
Oh, it's 8 hours back to back.
It's consecutive.
Most often it's consecutive. There are some nurses who
16 hours.
Yes, there are some nurses who have opted to the position that if you're going to have me double, then I would like to work like a morning, rest the evening, and then come back in the night. Or work an evening and then come back. Rest the night and come back in the morning. So things like that we have done for the department so far. But what I was saying, that when you do all the math on the amount that GOB is actually paying, when you compile all the overtimes that have to be, an overtime hour is an hour and a time and a half. So for every 3 hours overtime, you could have basically paid 4 staff.
Yeah.
You see? So with the amount of overtime, and if you want to get the work done, you have to pay for it. So when you compare now the amount the ministries, the government of Belize is paying in overtime, it is way more
Than if they
than
just
if
hired
they
new
would
employees.
hire new employees to the quota that is
Now,
necessary.
let me ask this. It seems to me that to a degree, you would face some kind of objection from others who, for whatever reason, may be content with the double time because they're financially incentivized. They're getting a certain amount of money. And now if you're saying, well, look, let's spread it out so we hire more persons on staff for the same amount of money, then that means my overtime and my ability to make that extra automatically gets cut out. Do you have that kind of resistance? Have persons expressed an unwillingness to go in that direction?
Of course. I don't think we will ever come up with a solution that works for all. However, again, when you need to know, take your hand out of the gate of the bad jar if you want, as a government, as an organization. This is not only negative for the nurse or the patient, it is also negative for the country, because now you put that nurse at a higher risk to commit negligent acts, and then the ministry obviously retains the services of that nurse. So then by extension, the ministry can be called into question for doing these things.
And I think it goes back to the core of the work you do. It's about proper patient care. And any person overworked naturally, it's not even intentional, can't be able to deliver the adequate service that they could if they were refreshed and rested. Although I understand what you're saying, that surely some won't want to give up the compensation, but the purpose of your work is good patient care.
And again, to remedy that issue of the need for the overtime is the problem there is what's causing our nurses to go away in the first instance. Where if you compare the salaries of a nurse in Belize with the cost of living, and you compare the salary of a nurse in another country with the cost of living, it's no
I was
way.
made to understand Canada has a drive for nurses.
Canada has a drive, quite a bit of for nurses, because people think that, and the nurse left, they went to the States. They gone States.
No.
And we are not looking at Canada, UK, other Caribbean countries, since we are now part of the CS. So these nurses are free to move in a large area. So.
And I was about to say that anecdotally, I spoke to a student at the nursing school who was very clear that her intention is to, and she's already looked through and she's doing her pros and cons of whether she wants to do the UK, USA, or Canada. Because they also have the nurse shortage, but they're trying to get people to come based on good packages. And in Belize, to be fair, we have better packages, which is why we see the Filipinos and we see some of the Central Americans coming in as well, and the Nigerians, because we offer a better package or perhaps more opportunities than they do there.
And yes, you have to say a better package than whom? Or
Which
where?
makes it subjective.
So I say, and when we touch like the Filipinos, when we touch on topics like the Nigerians, we have to realize that over the years, we have had more of them than Cubans, but Belize then is used as basically a stepping stone. So they move on from Belize.
So if
you're not pure to say then that they came here because of a better package. There was a better possibility. Belize opened doors for them from being here. This standpoint from being here, then they have access now to the broader world. So
that is interesting as well.
That's like a geographical thing, right?
Yeah, and just trying to, there will only be so much that we could offer. You've been a nurse since 1991, you said, and you're a nurse specialist, right?
I do anesthesia for the Northern Regional Hospital right
so
now.
It's similar to there's a general doctor and then there's a specialized doctor. You are a specialized nurse.
That is so.
So when you look at the situation of nursing, do you think that it can be purely financial benefits that will make people want to, one, pursue nursing, but also pursue nursing in Belize?
I definitely don't think that it's purely financial. Myself, to speak on a personal note, I am in the position right now to move.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm here for a reason.
Yeah.
The purpose is there are quite a bit of nurses who love to work in Belize. They would want to stay home.
Yeah.
But when you compile now, they put the problem on the table of the salaries. It is not the most attractive salary. Then you are going to put on the shortage where the posts basically aren't there. So you're given little daily sessions to come in. There's no future for your career that way, working on a day-to-day, week-to-week, even month-to-month basis. And then you put the shortage of materials and on the wards. Supporting services are lacking quite often. When you compile all this together, that's what making a lot of the nurses make that decision, you know what, I need to move away. So there are quite a bit of things. I said the task force is objectively going to take on quite a bit to clear up all of these areas. I know it will be kind of unfair for us to decide, you know, let's take a strike for a better salary. But let's take a stance to get quite a bit of these things cleared up, make the environment, though stressful, though limited in personnel, make it as comfortable as possible for the nurse while on shift.
Yeah. That's a big enough issue on its own, just the nursing shortage, but yet there is more. You spoke of needing to get the senior positions filled, and whether, and then also to address the issue of shortage. There are a couple other issues too that you wanted to take to the ministry level. Tell us what those are.
All right, so I said it is basically to take presentation on all the topics. One, the respect a supervisor gets from the ministry, the support they get from the ministry, where if the supervisor has a problem, there is basically the frustration that there's nothing that they can do. Because you write a letter, you take all steps necessary, you speak to your staff, and basically the ministry ends up doing what they want, or not doing anything to help you resolve that issue.
Is that part of why you want the chief nurse, that you would write to the chief nurse?
Quite a big part of why we want the chief nurse. And I don't want to say it is taking away the power of the minister per se, but I believe that the minister's responsibility is to supervise the positive, productive environment of the entire ministry. So going wrong and circumventing a supervisor is counterproductive. And things like that, those are the key things that we would like to deal with, where if I am the supervisor of this person, basically, as long as I am right, what I say ought to be what is done. And so you take it and you go back to, somebody in a ministry or a minister, may not even be Minister of Health, and you align yourself with that person, and then they call down to your supervisor and you can't do the staff anything. So how will we fix a bad situation?
So you're saying that there's political interference even at nursing supervision level?
There is political interference in this country across all levels, and it is no different in nursing.
No, but I think it's important for us to understand how this works. So you're saying if a nurse doesn't execute their duties properly, did something jeopardize the health of their patient, and you want to write them up as the supervisor, and you want to see some sort of investigate, what would be your recommendation?
Investigation, training.
Yeah.
And I don't like the punitive side, but ultimately in some cases you have to, it has to be discussed.
Well, I mean, healthcare is literally life and death sometimes. There's a big difference between
Yeah.
a mistake in other jobs and a mistake in healthcare. And you're saying when you want to take that concern up, there's sometimes political influence that will stop you from being able to take it further?
Of course. And now put ourselves in a supervisor's position. If this authority, this responsibility, this ability is taken away from you, how do you guide your flock then?
Yeah.
Because your neighbor will say, you know what, well, Marlene did that last week, so, and you get away with it.
You're essentially rendered powerless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're in a position of power without any power.
Okay, so there are no, it's disheartening. That's what it is, because I think that and I know your point. Political influence has tentacles everywhere, but when you're talking about people who are working with someone who is ill, you'd hope that would be a bit more protected. So your point is that if there's a chief nurse in place, you have a higher advocate that you can go to, although there is an acting person in that role. All right, so you have a meeting scheduled for today. Who are you meeting with, and what are you hoping the results to be?
The meeting is actually from the task force standpoint, and again, it's to go and discuss again the same objectives that we had presented earlier on. We meet with the Minister of Health this morning, and I want to believe the CEO of Health.
All right, well, do keep us updated, and thank you for bringing these issues to our attention. It is the International Year of Midwives and Nurses celebrated by the WHO, and that's because globally people, we're trying to get the attention out that this is a very important role in healthcare. So thank you.
And thank you guys for having us.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to the Forest Department about fire management in Belize, so stay tuned.
With over 100 years of service excellence in Belize,
we're back and we're moving into our second conversation for today as we start to talk about fire management in Belize. It's a little bit damp outside, so people aren't thinking about forest fires right now, but that's the point. It's about learning before the fire season starts, right? Yes. With us on set to share this information, we have Mario Muschamp, who is the terrestrial manager and fire expert at TIDE, the Toledo Institute for Development and Environment, and Raul Chun, who is the forest officer with the Forest Department. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's start off by talking about the fire season itself and what happens in preparation for it.
Okay, well, good morning and thanks for having us here on set and for sharing some information about fire management. Well, for the Forest Department, the fire season actually starts on February 15th and ends June 15th.
Yeah.
However, as climate change progresses, we're starting to see that the dry season may extend beyond June 15th, as was the case in 2019, as was the case in 2017. So in preparation for that, the Forest Department and TIDE, who operates in the south, that deals or has a portfolio for fire management, basically goes on in terms of raising awareness and also carrying out prescribed burns and stuff like that to kind of like reduce the threats of wildland fires.
On average, how many fires do we see a year?
We don't really necessarily have that number, but on average, we estimate anywhere between 93,000 to 94,000 acres of land actually burning annually.
Is it that we're trying to prevent these fires from occurring, or is it that we're trying to manage as best as possible? I ask because I am of the understanding that fires, in a sense, are necessary for regrowth and what have you. So where is the mandate?
Well, actually, the wildfires are actually bad.
Okay.
It's costly. It's damaging to ecosystems, particularly the broadleaf species, because these species are not adapted to fire. In terms of pine forests, pine forest basically requires fires, but again, if you have repeated, aggressive, intensive fires, it's damaging to the forest composition, to the dynamics of forests. So what we try to do basically is to install or implement what we call prescribed burns. Basically, reducing forest fuel loads and improving the aesthetics and the environment, giving the pine species or the pine saplings basically optimum conditions for growth.
Yeah. Now we have to put this into perspective too, because you said 2019 was different, and it was. We saw an extensive drought, especially in the north of the country. And so far, the predictions are that this year we will be seeing similar dry weather, which means it'll be extended and we don't get the rain we should. But also, if we look at what's happening around the world, everybody's talking about the Australian fire now just because of the size of it. But you've had the Amazon, you've had California fires. We've seen around the world where wildfires have been to the point of uncontrollable with devastating consequences. So that means for us in Little Belize, where we do get fires as well, we got to think preventative, right?
Yes.
Is that what's happening?
I would say thinking, we'd have to think preventative in some instances, but we really have to understand that some of our ecosystem actually needs fire. The important thing is how, when, and where fire is used. Right? So if we get fires during the hottest, driest time of the year, then we are getting those destructive fires. In fire management, we say fire has two faces.
Okay.
It has a good face and a bad face. You see those faces depending on how, when, and where it's used.
Okay.
Right? And in the case of our pine savannas in Belize, we are getting too much fires. We are seeing our savannas burning every year. And that's impacting pine regeneration. It's impacting some of our endangered species. So if we do not address it, then we'll be losing a lot of what we have.
I think the core problem for Belize is that we have an abundant, unwanted, uncontrolled fires that basically affects human health, the environment, and properties. And the concern really basically comes when you have fire and humans basically conflicting.
From a terrestrial point of view, Mario, what is the scope of the areas under tide's responsibility?
Okay, in terms of tide, we work in an area known as the Maya Mountain Marine Corridor. So it's that stretch of land from the foothills of the Maya Mountain to the coastline between the Monk River watershed and the Rio Grande watershed. So it's approximately 1 million acres.
Wow.
But it's not tide alone. We have a lot of partners in there. And so how we were able to address fire within that is the formation of a Southern Belize Fire Working Group, which is something that Raul will talk about as we move ahead during today's show. It's the only fire working group active in this country right now, and we have been able to address a lot of issues as it relates to fire within that corridor. So suppressing fires where we don't want fire, and using fire as a tool where fire is needed.
So here's an interesting fact that I saw in your presentation. So we see these wildfires far off from where we're driving or where we live, and we think, oh, it must be Mother Nature that created it. But you're saying the majority of these wildfires start by being intentionally set.
They are humans, that's fires.
Human-induced.
There are naturally caused fires from lightning, but the occurrence of that is not like we're seeing fires in Belize. As in where I've been working for the past 21 years, I've seen only 4 lightning strike fires in 21 years.
Wow.
So that tells you is like every 4 or 5 years you would get a lightning strike fires or naturally caused fires within these areas. And that's the kind of fire, what we call fire regime, that we'd like to bring back to these areas, because that's the kind of fire that really promotes regeneration and really take care of the forest.
But 1 million acres of land is a vast expanse, right? That's beyond the eye can see or the mind can imagine. Are there enough resources in terms of the organizations working together or the wherewithal necessary to be able to cover 1 million acres of land?
Hence the reason for the working group. When we looked at fire management, for example, because Tide, we only co-manage 2 of those protected areas within that corridor, the terrestrial. We have the Yashe Conservation Trust, which manages other areas, and then we have long-term forest licensees, like that works in that area, that are also responsible for fire. So together, we work to address these things. And what we have done is, over the years, we realized that even just us alone as those groups can't. We had to bring in communities. So we had to get community members trained so that they are able to deal with fires and fires that surround their communities. And most of these communities are farmers, so they actually use fire to clear land and so on. And a lot of the fires we were seeing were escape from these burns, these agricultural burns that we were seeing.
Escape as in the fire spread further than
they wanted to. And so we had to address that by actually teaching these farmers how to do it properly. And so for the past 2 years, we can say that within the Maya Mountain Marine Corridor, there were no escape fires from agricultural burns because of the work that we have been doing with farmers.
The thing is, like we said earlier, the fires are human-induced. And why? Because of land cover change, or land use change, sorry. And so the more and more people getting into these forested areas for community development, you see people basically not being aware of the threats of fire to property and life. And so they're not also aware in terms of the proper use of fire, because there are benefits, but then there are consequences. And if you're not aware of the consequences, then basically you not only put yourself at risk, but also other people, and especially those the people that actually are vulnerable in terms of respiratory diseases and heart conditions. Smoke basically affect these people.
Of course, yeah.
The concern really for us is that the amount of fires and the threat it poses to.
So how do you go about ensuring that as many people as possible learn proper fire management? Because I think I recall from previous conversations, it's you know, securing your area, having enough parameter between your farm, fire breaks, your words, right? But even paying attention to the wind pattern for that day, the weather. How do you make sure? Because if I, you know, move to a farm in a forested area, I create a farm, I may never have that information. I just know what used to be done, what I've seen other people do, and perhaps has always worked for me, but with climate change, things is different.
Well, the thing is, we're kind of like trying to get more organized. Initially, we would normally just go on I say, like raising awareness. But now, for 2019, we started or actually established a national fire working group where we have government agencies and NGO representation making up the membership of this national fire working group. So what we intend to do really is to get coordinated and do proper planning. Well, one, to continue with public awareness. Two, to really move towards proper fire management. All this thing about prescribed burns and fire management planning and so on. Those are the things that we want really to work on. But the thing is, we need to get into communities. We need to get into schools. We need to get into institutions, government institutions, for example, like the Ministry of Agriculture needs really to step up in terms of their responsibility as it comes to agricultural fires. The Forest Department basically looks at forest fires or wildland fires more, but in terms of their of our protected areas.
Well, how do you synchronize? Because what I hear from you is that very often it's an agricultural fire that may spread to become a forest fire. So how do you work together with the Ministry of Agriculture?
Yeah, well, the thing is, we're trying now to bring them in. Well, they form part of the National Wildland Fire Working Group. So we can now hopefully use this platform to work together and to basically try to get our people trained. Tide basically has a very good program in the south. Tide basically is the chair of the Southern Belize Fire Working Group that has trained communities in terms of fire management, use of fires properly. So we want to basically replicate that in other districts. And really, we are working towards that in terms of the north, the central zone, and probably a subgroup in the Mountain Parish Forest Reserve area.
Well, Mario, sorry. Go ahead. What's your experience with working in these communities? You said last year there was no breakaway fires. In other words, the fires that were set were contained. And that was in one of the driest times we've had in a long time. So that shows things are working.
Well, what happened is, in the past, these fires would escape from these farmers and destroy the farmers' crops. And so they would have to compensate that farmer for his crop. And it happened to a couple of people, and then those folks, knowing that Tide we were responsible and dealing with fires in our area, they approached the Southern Belize Fire Working Group to assist with building that capacity so that these things don't happen again. Because then now you have to take money out of your pocket to pay for that damage. And so the communities actually came looking for this kind of training, which was what we wanted in the first place.
Because there was a financial implication.
Yes, we didn't want to really bring it to them and we wanted it to come
ready
from them.
Yeah.
And then we provide the training. And now we are seeing the benefits from those trainings. Like Raul said, the Southern Belize Fire Working Group has been operating for the past 12 years. And we have addressed fires in that area by eliminating, I would say when we first looked at it, we were getting maybe 25 fires per year, wildfires. We are down to now maybe 1-2 wildfires per year in that time. So we have cut down the incidence of wildfires there drastically. So what we are seeing
this
now
is largely
more
this is largely the result of what we call slash and burn practices.
Yes. Yeah. So the slash and burn farm practices is what is really was causing a lot of the escape fires from happening.
So it's working in the south, so we think that
Yeah.
we can try to replicate this.
What are the key changes that you teach them so that their fire doesn't get uncontrollable?
Well, one of the first things is the laws of this country. Because
So
there
it's
are
a good
laws,
place to
there
start.
are laws
Yeah.
that relates to fires.
Yeah.
And if you broke those laws and, for example, damage, so you can be
Liable.
taken to court and
Okay.
be fined and all of that stuff. So that was one of the main things that was one of the things we started with. And then we started to say, look, people has been using fires for a long time,
Yeah.
and it will never stop them from using fire.
Yeah.
So how can we help them to use it safely and properly so that we lessen the chance of escaping and burning what they don't want to burn? And so we worked with them to address that. So focusing on the weather conditions, because most of the farmers in the past wanted to get the hottest time to burn, because they want to consume everything. And really and truly, that's bad, because when you burn everything, then you are also taking out a lot of the nutrients that the ash would provide. So you don't want to burn when it's too hot and too dry, because then you're losing some of the nutrients that can come back into that soil to improve your crop, your yield from your crop. And so we tell them, look, you don't have to wait until it's too dry. It's how you're using techniques to put fire in the ground to achieve what you want to achieve.
Okay.
Right? And so the past couple of years, we help them burn during conditions when it's not too dry. And what they're seeing from that is that they get better yield from their crop. So more and more people are changing from burning in the hottest time of the day and finding that the right time to burn.
Okay. So it is a change of mindset.
It's a change of mindset, yes.
And also putting in other techniques as well.
Because fire has to do with science and an art. Right? Because you have to understand fire behavior and the impacts of fire, and that's the science part. The art is how you put it on the ground to achieve your objective.
If you are to replicate this same exact thing elsewhere in the country, I would want to think that you would have to consider other factors, right? Like, for instance, the topography in the north is different than in the south. Perhaps the kind of soil or soil composition is also different as well.
Everything is different. The north gets a lot less rain than the south, so everything is different.
The people or the institutions working in the districts, in the other districts, are different as well. And the thing is, what works, I think, for the Southern Belize Fire Working Group is the affinity. The people making up, or the institution makes up that group, basically have common interests, and so they work together easier. So we have to try to find those institutions or organizations in other districts to see who have the common interest in terms of fire management, so that we can bring those people together and try to work with them. The thing is that we're using Mr. Musham as a mentor, basically taking him along to make presentations like this, or basically talk of his experience in other areas, so that we can kind of like persuade them.
What area is the most challenging when it comes to wildfires?
I believe in the north.
In the north? Why?
A lot of private properties, and the Mennonite communities basically just are more engaged in land clearing and stuff like that. So and they are basically a closed community, and so it's we're seeing a bit of challenge, I think, in getting really to. It will take a longer time. Because right now we're
because they use the burning. They do create their own fires.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think, looking at the global perspective and knowing the devastation that's been caused by wildfires. I mean, you're not just, we talk about the fires getting out of control and the resources it takes, but people have lost homes, they've lost their life. In Australia, for example, I think the statistic is well known now, 500 million animals have died in that fire. Some are quite possibly going to be extinct after this, and even special species of plants. So if I think in Belize, where we are facing unprecedented dryness, you know, your fire season is going beyond what it normally does. We have to be on the ball. Like, we have to make sure we're not going to do anything to ruin or lose all the beauty that we love and try to protect here. So how do you capitalize? How do you take these examples and bring agriculture to the table, bring the farmers from the Mennonite community to the table and say, look at what's happening out there. We cannot afford to have that happen here.
Basically, it will take one-on-one conversations with them. Actually, we're trying to work with an organization out of Corozal to basically try to reach out to they have good working relationships with them, so we're using that advantage somewhat. And so, so that would probably be one of our strategies. Again, the community consultations, public awareness, again. I don't know, Mario?
Yeah, it will require a lot of public awareness. But for that, it's not our issue, because that's why we had developed the National Wildland Fire Communication Strategy,
exactly.
which the department should pick up and start using to sensitize the public on fires and the issues of fires and fire management. And then we have the National Wildland Fire Management Policy and Strategy, which also needs to get implemented for us to really put a handle on this thing. And I'm hoping that the department can really push Cabinet to really get these things approved and we start using them, because they were not just developed to
sit on
be
a
placed on a shelf.
Exactly.
We put a lot of time and effort into developing these things to address what we're seeing, and if they're going to be put on a shelf, then we wasted our time.
Exactly.
So we need
and the thing is, we have funding right now to actually start implementing some of the strategies that are detailed within the wildland fire policy and strategy, and also within the communication strategy for fire. So we couldn't see this 10 years ago, but now we can see this, and hopefully it's opportune that that we can do all this given the weather conditions, the expectations that we may have a very intense fire season this year.
So, other than being able to try to get people to properly manage their fire, what's been happening in terms of the response side? Who responds to a wildland fire that gets out of control?
Well, at this time, like for brush fires and bushfires around communities, the Belize National Fire Service actually are the ones that are called to address these fires. When it comes to fires in our protected areas, we normally would address those ones. Our efforts in terms of the forest department during the dry season basically lies with the Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve. Why? Because then that area is basically managed for sustainable forest management. The terrain is very rugged. We need more of our efforts there, and so our staff basically are placed on fire duties during the dry season. So in terms of like covering the entire country, the forest department
do we
is
have
not
a plan
really
though? I mean, in the event that one fire gets out of, there's no response plan?
There's no response plan really. The thing is, yes, there is. But the thing is, the actors are not organized, so it's
like working in your own area.
Yeah, we have
I could recall 5 or 6 years ago, perhaps 7 would be a stretch, where the Mountain Pine Ridge was on fire for a very long period of time.
2017.
Yeah, and the response to the fire I would say was pretty challenging for everyone involved.
Yes.
Because in my opinion here, it seemed to have been addressed a little too late. The response time, a lot had already happened, and so attempting to bring it under control proved difficult for the responders. Now you're saying that while yes, there is a strategy or a plan in place, but those who are responsible to execute the plan may not be as organized as they ought to be, then that adds a totally different or new dimension to what the existing challenges are.
That's the reason we're now moving into national coordination, so that it doesn't, hopefully it doesn't repeat. So we have the National Wildland Fire Working Group now. We have Southern Belize Fire Working Group. The intention really is to expand that network, and that is part of the plan. And then from there, the finer management plans for the different sites or landscape level plans will come into being, and then hopefully it can be handled with a bit more effectiveness. What caught us, I think, in 2017 was that the Forest Department was the only one basically working towards, suppressing that fire. So people get tired. I mean, it's a very arduous and tedious thing. So it really placed a lot of pressure on the department.
Well, we hope that in addition to looking at improving management throughout the country, you do work on that national response as well. We don't, and we're in the city especially, we don't think about it as often as I know perhaps other communities do. But it is a very critical issue, and as you said, the fire season actually starts in a month's time. And while you can't say with certainty, it's very likely to go beyond what is usually the fire season in June, since we are predicted for another drought.
The meteorological department basically is predicting a dry spell until, I think, May 2020, and that is right within our fire season. So and it can even go beyond. So things we can only ask people to basically be responsible in terms of when they're burning areas for milpas or for farming, when they're burning garbage. These things are especially when you burn on a windy day, the embers can easily pick up and start another fire. And you can easily,
I can never understand that one. I mean, it's just logic. If it's windy, why would you light a fire?
And so those are the things that we try to teach to improve fire management, using the weather to your advantage. You don't want to be burning in the hottest, windiest, driest time, because then that's a recipe for disaster. So we try to, like for us in the south, most of our prescribed burns we try to do when it's still a bit wet. So you get a lot cooler burn, you lessen the chance of escaping occurring, and less work for you, the guys who are working these fires.
And the thing is, and if the dry spell continues, the drought continues, even broadleaf forests can actually burn. So all those areas, the Chiquibol National Park and the Chiquibol Forest Reserves, and all the other protected areas southwards, I mean, if it gets dry enough, below, I believe, 45% relative humidity, anything can actually, spark.
Because the fuel load goes up at that point, right?
But the thing is, it's loaded with fuel right now, because it hasn't seen, I think the last time that area actually burned was after the passing of Hurricane Hattie or something like that. So the leaf litter and all that basically is there. If it gets dry enough, the same thing that happened in Brazil, the same thing that happened in Australia can easily happen here in Belize, right? And the thing is, our personnels are not may not be enough, and may not be wide-ranging enough to really respond to these fires. So
well,
so
I
we have
think
to build capacity at the national level to really address these fires.
So
that's where my role comes into play.
So we are also doing the same. Actually, tomorrow we start with a 4 days training in fire management at the Mountain Parish Forest Reserve. Nice. Basically exposing our people along with other institutions, including resort owners from around the Mountain Parish area, to basically the techniques and precautions that they should take.
Well, gentlemen, we do appreciate you coming in. I think that one of the things that is inspiring is that you are looking as much as possible at prevention of any possible problem as the weather patterns continue to change, as we continue to see devastation from the very same issue in other parts of the world. We want to know that we are at least thinking ahead to prevent and possibly address anything like that. So thank you very much. Okay. And to get in touch with you about the training, where do they contact?
Well, for now, we've filled up the spaces, but the thing is, if there's any institution that wants us to deliver a training for them, you can contact us at 822-1524, the Forest Department office in Mopan, or my cell number is 614-2850. Mario, also.
In the case of us at Tide, we do have a sort of a consultant team that we use to do fire management work.
So you can be hired.
We do training. We do fire management plans development, all that stuff.
Okay.
So and for me, you can reach me at the Tide office at 722-2274 or 2431. My cell number is 671-6568. Or you can email me at mwaschamp@tidebelize.org.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming in, gentlemen.
Thank you too.
Thank you too.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in a few. Stay tuned.
As one of the largest cable and internet providers in Belize, CBC strives to provide our customers with
And welcome back to the final segment of our show this morning. We'll take this opportunity to be able to remember the late Belizean musical icon Andy Palacio. Now, he died in 2008, January 19th. So it's 12 years since, and we're going to be looking back on the life as well as the musical achievements of Andy Palacio. And just one small little inclusion here. While Andy Palacio's music is renowned the world over, he is famous among Belizeans for having put us on the international stage insofar as Belizean music. It transcends just Garifuna music. It's a part of our cultural and national identity. And so insofar as his music, he has brought Belize to the forefront. I recall, Marlene, in January 2008, prior to Andy Palacio's passing, when he fell ill and all efforts were made to try to, get him the best medical attention and treatment. And so when he passed away, it was a shock to all of us.
Yeah.
It rippled across the country. Now, I'm saying that as a basis for a juxtaposition, because while I do have roots in Barranco village where he was buried, when the day of the funeral came, everyone transcended on Barranco village where Andy Palacio was laid to rest. 12 years later, it's almost as if though his final resting place has all but been forgotten in terms of its upkeep and the fact that this is where one of our greats was laid to rest. And so while we remember Andy Palacio for the musical and the cultural and the national achievements, we also have to remember that, where persons of this particular and iconoclastic stature are buried, we need to also maintain it as sort of a landmark. Just as though we have the Baron Bliss Lighthouse, we should also be taking care of these other locations. But not to put a damper on it, we're here to celebrate in full.
It is a valid point, perhaps something we
life.
haven't considered to take a look at. And Andy, I think it was a devastating loss for not just his family, but for the wider community. We were fresh off celebrating his achievements. He won the WOMEX Award.
Yeah.
He had just, it was kind of the breakthrough moment for someone who had been pioneering Belizean music for so long. And Andy's history with Channel 5 goes far back as well. There was the Andy Palacio show, and he was doing music videos here before a lot of people, and just it was we saw all of that and we celebrated him locally. It was just that the international world was just getting the taste of it. And unfortunately, which I think if a lesson to be learned, you should always know your health status. It was high cholesterol. I know that. Remember, that was a part of his problem. It led to a stroke. So you can't take, and he was traveling and working so hard, and so it was just such a sad loss. But that was 12 years ago, believe it or not. I remember reporting the news at that time. It was just shocking that that was what was happening just less than a month after that beautiful concert at Rhoda's parking lot.
Let's look at it from another perspective here. I am a music lover. I think most people who know me knows that music is life. When you look at Andy Palacio's body of work, right, from the very first song being recorded, the very first album being released, and you look at his final album, which is the Watina album, that hands down is considered his magnum opus, right? It's the album that put him on the world stage. It's the album that he has been renowned for in terms of the critical acclaim that has come with it. Beyond the praises, however, for those of us in the Garifuna culture who understand the language and understand where the music comes from. That was a spiritual piece of work, deeply spiritual, so much so that other persons who don't understand the language just listen to the way the music is sung. It speaks to you on a personal and deeply emotional level, right? So when you listen to songs on Watina, you had asked me a couple of shows back what was my favorite and the Palacio song. I think this was in celebration of his birthday in December. And there was one song that I pointed to, and I still point to that song, right? Again, it's called Agri Ane Duhenyo. That means my relatives, my loved ones have gone on. And it is so pertinent to his passing. The song and the arrangement and the musicianship of this particular album in itself, every time you listen to it, like you're learning something new. It takes you through a particular experience. There's a part with him and the late Paul Nabor as well, where the canoe, again it's in Garifuna language, but they're talking, the canoe overturns, it capsizes, but no one is there. No one is there to come to his aid. And so he's thinking, well, I'm gonna drown in this lagoon by myself, there's no one. But it's metaphorical, right, in a sense, because when you listen to how it is placed, its arrangement and everything, it speaks to some of the journeys that we go through in life, and we feel like we can't go anymore and we're all alone, right? It's just one of those, I'll just put that out there.
No. I think I appreciate your reflection. I think you make me want to go back and listen to the album again today, which we should. I know we celebrated his birthday. We had a discussion then, and today on the anniversary, well, in the anniversary of his passing, 12 years later, we wanted to do a little flashback on some of the highlights of Andy Palacio and his career. So we're going to take a look at that now.
Can I hear the younger generation make some noise? You are the future, and this song is about you. This song is dedicated to people in whom we are placing our trust, our hope for the continued survival of the Garifuna language, for the survival of our dances, indeed, our entire culture, our belief systems, our interpersonal relationships. You, for us, are the hope. You are the reason for the struggle. This song, which means in times to come, is called Amuyeg. Kabafuna sa anyuga wabute amunyego Kabafuna sa yano hagarifuna numa amunyego Kabafuna sa aruma anuma o amunyego Kabafuna sa ategraha wa o amunyego Agenga wati yo wa yunago no habagarito igari nago wati amesa aferi dire wangabure matega wame Ferdi wayaliye Gomo gobae 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 Ferdi wayaliye Gomo gobae
So, born out of this experience in the latter years of his life was the Garifuna Collective, right? And so the Garifuna Collective got its roots, so to speak, from having performed extensively with Andy Palacio. And while we're acknowledging the Garifuna Collective as part of the broader supporting cast, we also must acknowledge as well Ivan Duran from Stone Tree Records, as well as Yasser Musa, who was the former president of the National Institute of Culture and History at the time when this album was released. And so the overwhelming cultural push behind the music and behind putting this particular Belizean cultural product out there for the rest of the world, I think is a very, very huge accomplishment for the country.
All right. So we are actually going to take a break now before we wrap up the show, so we'll be back in a few.
Survival of the Garifuna.
With over 100 years of service,
want to say thank you to our viewers for, of course, joining us this morning for the different conversations we've had, looking at the news from last week and also the news that we can expect for the week ahead, and of course our conversation with the Nurse Association as well as the Forest Department and Tide. But that's all the time we have for today. Remember, if you want to contact us, send us an email at oye@channel5belize.com. Drop me a line at marlene_oye@channel5belize.com. Find us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ, and then Instagram at OYE Belize. And remember to tune in tomorrow morning at 6:30 when you open your eyes.
To start your morning right.
Until then, keep your eyes, your mind,
and your hearts open.
We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, Belize.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.